Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast with Jackson and Kyle. Before we get too far into this, just want to let everyone know, subscribe to our Clips channel. We have a Clips channel now where we're going to post the clips from all this podcast. The link is in the description, so everyone, make sure you check that out. It's probably the best way you can help support us right now. But as always, I am joined here by noted power rankings expert Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
I am good. I just want to start this show saying that I might be, keeping the corner of my eye on the dunk contest. So if I scream during this, something cool happened.
Okay, I had no idea that was even on, but I'm glad that you're keeping close eyes on it, doing a great job here at Jackson Kruger Sports.
Yeah, it's what I do, man.
Yes. So, so here's how the show is going to work. We're going to do a power rankings draft, basically, where we're going to go back and forth. We're going to draft a team and do our own power rankings, see how it goes. We love drafts here on the Sideline podcast. So it should be fun. And again, the way we're doing it is we're taking everything into consideration. So if you're going to, have a good draft pick, that gets brought into consideration. The cap space, it's not just where you are right now, but where you probably will be going into the playoffs or going into the regular season. And without further ado, Kyle, let's give you the first pick.
All right. I feel like I get the first pick in a lot of these drafts. Mm-hmm. I'm giving them the number one spot just because, I think they deserve it. I always give it to the champion at the end of the day. As of right now, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as the number one team on my power rankings list, and I'm going to take them number one overall. Now, going forward, they have some issues they have to address. They have questions on, who are they going to, I think that it's manageable to bring back the offensive guys. I think they're going to be able to bring back Gronk, Brown, and Godwin. I think they're going to figure out a way to do it. I think Fournette's obviously probably gone. The question is, of these defensive guys, with Sue, with David, and with Barrett, which ones are they going to bring back, and how do they make that work in their cap situation? They don't have a lot of cap space, but I think there's ways to finagle it. I'm still going to go with Tampa Bay, though. They're the champions until proven otherwise.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I had Kansas City 1. I have Tampa Bay 2, and it's for a lot of the stuff you mentioned. It's for Tampa Bay has to, they have guys they have to sign. On top of this, they have guys who aren't getting any younger. Their quarterback's going to be 44. And listen, you can't count him out. He's Tom Brady. He's going to play until he's 74. We also have some great chats already. We have fake Bucs fan. So they're saying that, Kyle, you're a fake Bucs fan, I guess.
Am I?
Yes.
I guess so. I don't know. So I thought he was talking about you.
Well, yeah, I mean that was my joke. I don't know. I've only been a Bucs fan for 15 years or so. So I guess it's fair. Also, Alex Smith going to be the Patriots quarterback from delusional Patriots fan. You'd think a delusional Patriots fan would shoot for the stars a little bit higher than Alex Smith.
Yeah, I hope we don't get Alex Smith. Please no. 36-year-old quarterback who just had. Is it far enough along now that we can say that he had a bad year? Like, he wasn't very good.
Yeah, he was. It's fine. He has value, but he's not someone you want as a starting quarterback.
So yeah, it's okay. I'll pass. So
yeah.
we'll move on with that. I still have Tampa Bay 1. I did have Kansas City 2, who I'm assuming you're drafting next. But yeah, so just talking about Tampa, but the defensive issues, I think there are going to be questions. But, I still think some of those guys are going to be able to be replaceable. I still think this team's going to be firing off fronts, and they're going to be very dangerous next year again.
Yeah, you're probably right. And listen, I think that these are, again, it's not exactly a hot take picking the two teams that went to the Super Bowl as the number 1 and 2. But I think the reason why I have Kansas City ahead is also, they're going to get healthier, you would assume. They're going to get their tackles back, which I think would be a huge plus.
Is Fisher going to be able to play next year?
I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't have just said that blankly. Do you have evidence saying he shouldn't?
Well, I just, from what I've heard about torn Achilles, it seems like it's unrealistic to expect him to play next year. That's just my thought.
That's probably fair. That's a really good point. So maybe that is a fair ding there for Kansas City, but they should get Schwartz back at least. And I think they'll be able to keep the core together at this. They'll keep pretty much the whole team together. But yeah, it's 1A and 1B here. These are two, great teams heading into 2021.
Yeah. And there are ways for Tampa to kind of open up some cap space here. I'm looking at over the cap right now. And, if they wanted to go this route, they could cut a few guys. It's, the two that I'm looking at are potentially, if they want to, Cameron Brate and OJ Howard would be $6 million in cap savings, if I'm reading this right. So,
each,
yeah. So if they want to like bring back those guys who they feel are more important, they can cut both of them. They could cut one of them and have one of those guys pair with Gronk. So I think there's a situation where they can get the cap space to about $20 million, $25 million if they want to work towards that, and eventually, bring back a lot of those guys who are available. So it's going to be interesting to see how they rebuild that, but I think that there is options and avenues for them to retool this roster.
Yes, I also like. I'd rather have playoff Lunny, which is well said because of the shirt I happen to be wearing, the playoff Lunny T-shirt. So well done there, Gavin, figuring out. But yeah, no, and I also think that, quite frankly, Tampa Bay could use that number 32 pick better than Kansas City could, because they could draft a running back and they could draft a position that would help them more than maybe Kansas City could. So it's interesting. These are two teams. Let's move on now, because I think that those were the obvious ones. I think it's a little bit more interesting as we go down here. So number 3, we're circling back to you. Who do you got?
The Buffalo Bills. I'm going to go with the Bills here. They managed to keep their offensive coordinator in Brian Daboll, which I think is important. They bring back basically the core of this roster that made the AFC Championship game. Now they feel like they still felt like a good measure behind Kansas City, but they're in that conversation, and they felt like the second best team in the AFC all season long. They have, it looks like John Feliciano and Darrell Williams are like the two guys in free agency that they have to bring back. But there's, I think that they have a lot of their returning talent. They are going to get big jumps, I think, this season out of Zach Moss and Gabriel Davis, who look good as rookies. So I think this team's going to be really dangerous again, and I have them at number 3.
So can I give maybe this is a hot take. I'm not sure. Are we sure Brian Daboll is good?
I mean, I think the thing is so he's been around the league, right? And he's been very kind of average outside of this season. I think that he's good working with Josh Allen. And it seems like that's the most important thing. I don't know if he's a good coach. If he's a head coach, I don't know if that's going to work because he's been around the league so long and hasn't really stood out. But I think he has a good rapport, it seems like, with Allen, and they seem to trust each other.
Well, I guess here's my concern. This was the kind of team that it felt like so many times it was just, we're going to pass the ball every single play. And I get it. You have Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs, you have a great pass blocking offensive line. But the run game wasn't awful last year. Like I felt like there was definitely times when I'm like, they should be running the ball more. And I think it's my concern for Buffalo, and it's something you can fix, but they didn't run the ball as effectively as they probably, they were mediocre at running, I guess I would say, and they could be better at it. But they still think they could have utilized it a little bit better. And on top of it, they can't stop the run. So those are two clear issues, I think, heading into next season. And again, there are things that can be fixed, though. So it'll be interesting to see how they do it.
Yeah, I think it is things that can be fixed. And like I said, I think maybe with Zach Moss getting a full training camp, they trust him a little more at the beginning of the season. They can establish a run a little more early in the season. I'm not overly concerned with the offense and, balancing running the football. I think what this team needs is a couple pass rushers to step up and hit a higher level, because that seemed to be a huge thing with Kansas City, who, they were already facing some injuries against Buffalo in that AFC Championship game. And it didn't matter. You saw the difference between Tampa Bay's defensive line and Buffalo's defensive line. And not that they need to be at Tampa Bay's level on the front four, but they need to be able to, if you're going against a JV level offensive line, like, some of those injured guys on Kansas City at that point, you have to be able to hit a guy and put him on the ground.
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I should just clarify about the Daboll thing. It's like he did an incredible job with Josh Allen, and all the passing stuff, fantastic. So there's stuff I like about him as well. I'll move on to number 4 now, a team that I had number 3. I'm going Green Bay. I'm going to Green Bay Packers. And again, they're essentially, they're more or less the same team. They're a little bit under the cap, they have some cap space issues they might have to work out a little bit. But this offense was the best in the league last year. And they were, people keep saying like Heineke gave Tampa Bay the best run for their money. The Green Bay Packers did. I mean, if they were right there, it came down to a goal line or first and goal situation that they weren't able to convert on and kick the field goal. Green Bay had a real shot to win that football game, and and they were right there. I think that their offense should, again, I get it. They're losing some guys in free agency, losing their center, Lindsey, losing Aaron Jones. They might be able to get some of that back. I don't know. But so I think it's fair to put them 4 instead of 3 as well. But they're a really talented team, and they have Aaron Rodgers, who's, he had the best season in football last year at the quarterback position. He's really talented, and I don't know how many years he's going to play with Green Bay. He only has 1 year under his contract, but I think that they deserve the number 4 spot here.
I agree with this one. I had them at 4 as well. Did you have them over Buffalo, I guess is my question?
I had them at 3, Buffalo 4.
Okay, yeah. So I had them at 4, so I got them right at that spot. The Aaron Jones thing will be interesting if they bring him back, and if they don't bring him back, if he finds a better offer, they don't franchise tag him, then you hope that the draft capital you spent on AJ Dillon works out, or they figure out a way to make that work in the running game. I think that this team, if they don't draft a receiver this year, I'm done. Like, honestly, if they don't find a way to bring a receiver in, I'm done. Now, the thing is that, 13-3 in 2 years, 13-3 each year in Matt LaFleur's first 2 years. So I think with the state of this roster, not a whole ton of changes. I think they find a way to bring back Lindsey. Is there any reason to believe that this team can't go 11-5? You can't pencil it in for 11 wins, especially in that division.
You mean like as a floor, or like
as a floor?
Yeah, I think that I would be shocked if they missed the playoffs. I would be absolutely shocked.
Yeah, I think Minnesota's going to get better next year, but I think Chicago is probably going to regress. So at that point, you have a situation where you should probably have 4 wins in your division at least, if not, at least 4, and definitely it feels like a 6-win division kind of season. I know they had the weird thing with Minnesota last year, but they just seemed to class at that division. So if they can get 5 or 6 wins out of that, there's no reason to believe this team can't get 5 wins anywhere else. And they're going to be awesome on offense again because they have Aaron Rodgers. Long term, I don't know what it's going to look like, but I think they're going to be good for the foreseeable future. Yeah.
All right. So I think the first 4 are, again, like the interesting thing is, do you have Chiefs 1 or Bucs 1, or do you have Packers 1 or Packers 3 or Bills 3? I think it really gets interesting after those 4. So number 5, where are you going with here?
All right, this will be interesting. I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Rams. They got some cap issues to work out here, but this team's really talented. And, you could say the drop-off from Stafford to Goff doesn't seem like a whole lot, but based on everything we've heard from this past season and since the trade happened, McVay was out on Goff. He didn't want him there anymore. So imagine if he has a quarterback he wants performing this offense and playing in this offense. I think this could be a special season for the Rams if they manage to stay healthy. They got a really talented roster on both sides of the ball. They got the quarterback they want. I think the biggest question I have with the Rams is, I don't see a huge changeover in the roster. There are huge changeovers in their coaching staff. So how are they going to be able to handle all these changes? I have it here. They lost Brandon Staley to defensive coordinator, assistant head coach, linebackers coach Joe Barry, passing game coordinator Shane Waldron, and cornerbacks coach Aubrey Pleasant. So there's a lot of changeover in the coaching staff, but I still believe that there's a lot of talent on this roster, and they're going to be just fine. And I believe in this team to be a Super Bowl champ, potentially.
Yeah, no, I have them at number 6. So I had clear cut. I have tiers, and I had 5 clear-cut championship contender tiers. 4 that we mentioned, and 1 that'll probably be a shock on my next pick. But I think the Matthew Stafford thing could be a really key plus here. And we think about this with the Rams. How many times have we seen Goff? A few times every season, just completely throws away a game, and he'll just completely collapse. And no matter how big of a Goff fan you are, you acknowledge that he just had some moments, and obviously the most notable was the Super Bowl against your guys. And I think that getting rid of that and getting just someone who's a bit more consistent, that'll get you a couple more wins just off the top of it right there. And if you can get a couple more wins, that's easily worth 2 first-round picks. The coaching turnover is a real issue. And, the one thing about McVay is we know that he kind of likes to be sort of get a good defensive mind and let him do his thing. So if this is a miss in the coaching hire, that could be a real concern. That's really the only way I could see this Rams team kind of going down.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. But at the same time, with the amount of talent on this defensive roster, like how far is down going to be? Like, is it going to be
Mhm.
like the eighth best defense in football instead of the best defense in football? Like, I still think this team, with especially how much better I think the offense is going to be with the consistent quarterback play you mentioned, and not just consistent quarterback play. I still think Stafford's a good quarterback, so I think it's going to be good quarterback play. I think with the offense getting better and Akers getting another year under his belt, he stays healthy this season potentially. This is a really dangerous team that I think could win, 13 games this year, even in that competitive division.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think it's Bill Belichick said coaching doesn't win you games; it can only lose you games. And as a Buccaneers fan, I've certainly seen that firsthand. So
Yeah.
anyone looking for a defensive coordinator, don't hire Mike Smith. But I think that because it can go off the rails if you get the wrong guy. But yeah, you have Aaron Donald. He's gonna, it's hard to have a bad defense with Aaron Donald.
And Jalen Ramsey. So,
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they have a loaded defense. You're right, but
yeah.
even if they just had Aaron Donald, they'd do okay.
Yeah. So, all right. So, who do you got for number 6 here?
Yes, this is number 5 on my board. This is the one I teased earlier. The last one of my clear-cut champions contender. Are you ready for this hot take, Kyle?
Yeah, let's see it.
I have the Indianapolis
Hold on.
Colts here at number 5. I think I love what the Colts have done, and you were high on them last year. I sort of doubted them, and I'm just all in on this Frank Reich and what he can do. And I think that Carson Wentz is going to. I think it's going to work out. I've sort of almost accepted that as fact, which is stupid. I shouldn't because that could clearly backfire. But I think that the Carson Wentz thing is going to work out. I love their cover 2 zone defense where they can still stop the run. It's so difficult to get around that. And that's kind of, the Chiefs struggled with that against Tampa Bay. This is what the Colts just do. They were a lot more competitive in that Bills game than, I think a lot of people were expecting beforehand. And I think that this is the team that they have a ton of cap space, so they can improve drastically. I think this is the team that if they play it right, and part of it is I just trust them to play this right, they could easily, I think, be a surprise Super Bowl team.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's that hot of a take. I had them at 9. You got them here at 6, and you had them at 5th overall. So I don't think it's too controversial. I think this team's really good. This defense is awesome. I think as much as Wentz did a lot with Little his first few years with Philadelphia, I think he really needs some wide receiver help this year. And I think that's going to be the big question addressed with that cap space. And, if they can get a guy or two to play wide receiver, I think it's going to be a very good football team. So I completely agree with you. Like I said, I had them in my top 10 as well, and I think that they're the definitive favorites in the AFC South. And yeah, I mean, I had them in the conversation for AFC Championship contenders early on.
Yeah, the chat not agreeing with me. Chat thinks this is a reach. But listen, again, part of it is I think that there is some truth to sometimes just take a step back and look at the bigger picture here. And what Indianapolis has done, trading for DeForest Buckner was a beautiful move. I expect them to be able to make some of these great moves. Like we're looking at their draft last year and saying that was a pretty good draft that they had last year. They didn't have a first round pick, and they still were able to get Jonathan Taylor in the second, Pittman in the third. I believe it was third, maybe he got him in second. But they were able to get these players later on in the draft. I think that this is a really smart front office, a really smart, well-coached team. And again, I trust that the Carson Wentz thing will work out. And if that doesn't, it could fall off the rails, which is why I had them at the end of my championship contenders tier. But I do think that this Indianapolis, I think it's going to work out because I think that Frank Reich knows how to use Wentz. And I think people don't realize how awful of a situation it was in Philadelphia. And I really think that this is going to be a good football team.
Is there anyone as unpopular as Carson Wentz who might still actually be kind of good? Like, I'm trying to think of like a comparison to him.
Yeah, I mean, some people might say Darnold. I wouldn't say Darnold, but some people might say Darnold. I think Derek Carr was a good one a couple years ago, but yeah, I feel like it's a similar situation. No, I don't think so. I think it's just him.
Like, even when he was successful, he wasn't popular. Now it's just easy to hate on him. I could see him bouncing back. I could also see it getting derailed, but I believe in this team. And like you said, Frank Reich's proven himself to be an excellent head coach. So I believe in this team to be really competitive for years to come. And I think that they're going to be a real player this year. So I agree with you.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, now it's time for your pick. Number 7. Where are you going here?
All right. So I had this team at 6. I'm I have 3 teams in the NFC West in my top 10. So I'm going to go with my second one here, and that's going to be the Seattle Seahawks. I'm not going to overreact to the Russell Wilson stuff yet. Unless this gets really sour really quick, I still believe Wilson's going to be a Seahawk by week 1. I still think that they're going to be a competitive team. I think they're going to finally listen to him and get some help on the offensive line, and that'll solve a lot of the issues with his unhappiness. And this, the thing is like by the end of the season, this defense was actually playing pretty good football. They kind of figured out some of their issues. They started to put it together. And I still just, even though I said before the season last year that this could be the best secondary in the league, I don't think it's as bad as they played last year. I still think that with the amount of talent in this secondary, this could be a pretty good secondary next year. Maybe not the best in the league, but it's going to be pretty good, which makes this defense then pretty good. And if they get some help blocking for Wilson with the amount of skill position talent, I still think this is a really good team in the NFC. So I'm going with the Seahawks.
Yeah, Seahawks are weird. I had them at 8, so they go here 7. You had them at 6. I have them at 8. I think that Seattle, they're an interesting team. For one thing, they don't have a first-round pick, so there is that. And I do think that this is a team that, you're right, their defense played a lot better. The Russell Wilson thing is a bit of a concern. I was in between them and another team. I decided to not go Seattle partially because of that, because I am concerned. What if Russell Wilson says, "Screw it, I'm not playing for you anymore. Trade me." Then what do you do? So it's an issue. I do think that, like, for one thing, Seattle has done their best to get a good offensive line. They just suck at it. They've made moves. They just haven't made the right moves. And so, are they going to be able to make the right moves all of a sudden? I don't know. But at the same time, they have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Russell Wilson, and a defense that, you're right, has picked it up. This offense was at times really good. And I think that, honestly, Russell Wilson didn't have a great season last year, and I expect him to have a better one in 2021. So as long as things don't blow up with the Russell Wilson situation, which I don't think they will, this should be a team that I could easily see doing a lot of damage.
Yeah, and of course they brought in Shane Waldron, the Rams coach, who's coming in as the offensive coordinator, replacing and that's a big thing I thought with the offense was Brian Schottenheimer had proven that he's not a good enough coach for this team. He's not a good enough offensive coach for this team. Now, can Waldron come in and improve this team heavily? I think he can tweak some things to maximize all the talent they have on that side of the ball. And I mean, you're right. It comes down to, they have been ambitious. They have made the moves. Now the moves just have to work out. If they can make the right moves on the offensive line, I see this team being really hard to beat.
Yeah, I agree. I'll move on now to number 8. This was number 7 on my board. I'm going to Baltimore Ravens. Again, I continue to like the Baltimore Ravens, and they're the team that they feel like they're a couple of moves away. And I think that I had to take last year when I predicted them to win the Super Bowl was, who cares if they don't have the receivers because they're so good at running the ball. Well, and the issue is in the playoffs, that can kind of go away. And you get better pass rushers. You can get sort of in this bigger issue where you kind of need to throw the ball a bit more. I think it can become more important. It becomes more important to have a more balanced offense in playoff games. So if you're great at passing the ball, you need to be able to run and vice versa. So I think that, again, they're a team that they know what they have to do. I do trust this front office. They can fix what they need to get fixed. And if they can do that, I could easily see this team. Again, I have a lot of faith in Lamar Jackson. He's a really good quarterback, and I think that they have a really good defense on top of it. So they're here at number 8.
Yeah, I had them at 7. The Ravens are still going to be really good. I mean, they have some questions on defense that they got to replace. Matthew Judon is probably the biggest name of that group that needs to be figured out. But this is still a team that's really talented on both sides of the ball and still going to be really good and one of the best teams in the AFC once again. I still don't have any doubts about this team. I still think they need to add a receiver, like you said, because when the game's just different in the playoffs and you need a guy you can rely on a 3rd and 6 to go get a ball and go make a play. So I think they're going to be able to have a guy like that. And if they can find a guy like that and replace these defensive guys, I mean, there's no reason to believe this team can't be a Super Bowl contender again.
Yeah, and that's what they really need to do is they need to focus on the playoffs because with Lamar Jackson, you're going to beat Cincinnati twice. You're going to beat these, the bad defenses basically every time you play them. It's just about beating good or great defenses that they really need to focus on.
Yeah. So the interesting thing for me was I believe they kept Greg Roman after all this, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I haven't heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So uh, there was a lot of Ravens fans obviously frustrated with Greg Roman by the end of the season. Do you think not having receiver led him to not trust that passing game enough?
Maybe, hopefully. I mean, if you're a Ravens fan, hopefully, because I think that there is the. But again, I do stand by like players win games, and when you don't have the receiver, when Hollywood Brown, who I still think has talent, he's not a number one guy, but if you go out and sign an Allen Robinson, who seemingly is just saying pay me the most money, so get him. The complete dynamic, or draft a guy in the first round, whatever. It can completely change the dynamic of the team, and also thank you, PD Sports, for the. We appreciate that very much. All right. You want to go on to number 9, or do you have anything else about the Ravens?
I mean, I'll just finish with the Ravens. They're still 9 months removed from us both saying they were they were a Super Bowl champion. They were going to be a
Mm-hmm.
Super Bowl champion. So I don't think I think this team, they could have us looking kind of silly by having them at number 8 by the end of next year, because they're that dominant season, because they're that good. They're still talented. What number is it here now? Number 9?
9, yeah.
Number 9. Okay, so number 9, I had this team at number 8 because of Indianapolis going higher. The San Francisco 49ers. So
Mm-hmm.
this is a team that I think, even if they just brought back Jimmy Garoppolo, is going to be a Super Bowl contender, because they made the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo on the roster. I think the stuff about Jimmy G is completely overblown. I don't think he's as bad as Goff. I don't think he's as bad as like Trubisky or Foles in that situation. I think he's a good quarterback. The issue with Garoppolo is health rather than talent. Now, I don't think he's a superstar quarterback. I don't think he's a Matt Stafford level quarterback. I don't think he's as bad as people are making him out to be. So San Francisco, I think, is still going to be really good. I think they have some questions on their secondary that they need to address. I know Sherman's a free agent. I think a couple of those other guys are. But I still think this is a really competent team that's going to be dangerous going forward.
Yeah, I think my biggest issue with San Francisco, with the Jimmy Garoppolo thing, is that he can't stay healthy. And so that's why I kind of buy into some of these quarterback trade, like the people, like the Bridgewater to San Francisco thing. People are saying, why would San Francisco do that? But they would do it because, you need a healthy quarterback. And it's not like Bridgewater has been a beacon of health, but, get someone who's at least consistent and can play. This team doesn't need a great quarterback, but they can't have an awful quarterback. And so get someone who can just stay healthy, and that would be a huge benefit, even if it's basically a push in terms of the talent of the quarterback themselves.
Yeah, so this team has some cap space to work with. Now, if they decided that they didn't want to spend a ton of money on their secondary, does this feel like a good Matt Ryan team then, essentially, if they wanted to really upgrade the position? Now, like I said, I think Jimmy G is good enough to lead this team. But if they wanted to upgrade the position, they had kind of the cap space to make it work. Do you think that's a situation that they might, see out?
I think it would be a great move if they could get Matt Ryan. For one thing, we've seen what Matt Ryan could do in a Shanahan offense, right? That was their, historic offense that went to the Super Bowl back in 2017, one of those years.
Mhm.
And yeah, and so I think it would be a great move. And again, I don't know how much it's going to take to get him. He does have a big cap hit, but yeah, I think that would be a huge move, because I do think that, again, if you tell me next, like, hey, Jimmy G's not going to get hurt next year, I say, okay, great, let's just keep him. But we don't know that.
Yeah. So 100%. But yeah, I still have them in the top 10, rounding out my NFC West trifecta. That's a dangerous division.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Arizona is not exactly a bottom team either. So number 10, this one again maybe a bit high. I'm going Miami here. I really like what I saw with their defense, and I don't think that their defense is going to get much worse. In fact, I could even see there be room for improvement. Their secondary was so good, and they have ways that they can find other talent. They got Byron Jones, and I remember one of our first podcasts where I was sort of talking about how I think we both were like Byron Jones a little bit overpaid, but I like the move because to compare him with Xavier Howard, it's not a coincidence that Howard completely went off last year, because he now didn't he was able to get more targets. And I think they could even improve, maybe get a linebacker that could be good for them. I also think that Obviously, the Tua thing is an issue. The quarterback situation thing is an issue because you just don't know. But I think they have so much capital to work with. They have the number 3 overall pick. They have these draft picks they can use to sort of improve their offense. And even if Tua ends up just being okay, that could be good enough.
Yeah, so I had them. I think, what did I have them here? I had them at 13. I still had it at a respectable range. Just some teams I liked a little more going forward. But this team is going to be really dangerous. If you're going to pay 2 cornerbacks that kind of money, you expect this level of performance where it's this good of a secondary. So I completely agree with the situation here. The Van Noy thing was a little surprising because I still think he's effective, and he's a Flores guy, but I understand he was probably a little overpaid, so it makes sense in that regard. And they have now some more money to work with. But yeah, I mean, the biggest question is going to be what kind of development can Tua have? Because, I mean, I think everyone kind of agreed with the way he was playing at points last year. Fitzpatrick probably gets this team to the playoffs, right? So they just need Tua to be kind of Fitzpatrick level to get to a playoff position.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have to be this, superstar quarterback. He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes. Just be a fine quarterback. You're getting to the playoffs, and this is the defense too that they can surprise some teams if they get into the playoffs. Maybe they go up against a great passing team that can't really throw on them. They nearly beat Kansas City last year. So I think this is and again, I trust the coaching staff. So yeah. You want to go over to number 11 here, or want to give final thoughts on Miami?
Well, just final thoughts on the Dolphins. I think that, they got to improve this offensive line. The draft pick they made last year, we talked about it last week. Austin Jackson wasn't particularly good. They need some help at receiver because, Devontae Parker regressed. And there's a couple other guys, they didn't get great separation. I think they had the worst in the league for separation numbers. So they got to improve wide receiver. They got to improve the offensive line. But this team's still in a position with the cap space they have and that defense to be really good.
Yeah, I agree. All right, number 11.
All right, my next team on my list, I'll just keep it going with this. Team in, I think, a very similar situation than Miami, other than that they trust their quarterback a little more at this very moment. Who knows what it's going to look like in the future. But I'm going to go with the Cleveland Browns, team that just missed they made the playoffs. Excuse me. What am I talking about? They made the playoffs just over Miami. Baker Mayfield looked good to end the season. This team still has a ton of talent. They need to add a corner or 2. They need to add a couple players on this defense, but they have the cap space to do it, and I think it's a dangerous team. So I'm going with the Browns here. I had them number 10 on my board, and I think I'm getting them here at number 11.
Yeah, I have them at number 11, so this is exactly where I have them. I think that, their offense is incredible. They have a great offensive line, great running back tandem, great receivers, and, not great quarterback, but good quarterback. And their clear issue is just defense. Can they get pieces together? Grant Delpit should be healthy. Maybe that could help. And they also do have some cap to work on it. So again, this is the kind of team where they have something they have to do, but if they do it, they could be really dangerous.
Yeah. And, the thing is, I think this front office, now, to be fair, the level of front office here in Cleveland up until this point was not good, but I think this front office has kind of figured things out and they're going in the right direction. So I think I trust these guys to bring in the right people. And, they had the coach of the year last year. I trust Stefanski a lot. I liked a lot of what he did. I was high on him before the season. I'm still high on him as a head coach. And I think this is going to be a really good group.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Number 12, it was really tough between 2 teams. I'm going Tennessee here. I'm going to Tennessee Titans. And the issue with the Titans, again, they're another team that they have issues on defense. There's no denying that. And they lost Arthur Smith. Derrick Henry is a key part of their defense. A lot of things could go wrong. But again, I just trust that as long as Derrick Henry continues to be Derrick Henry, they have a really good line in front of him. And Ryan Tannehill is really good. They have A.J. Brown. Corey Davis is the free agent, so that's a bit of an issue as well. So there's a lot of issues here, but there's also a lot of good with their offense, and I think that offense is what rules in today's NFL. So they have things they have to work on. Again, they're very similar to Cleveland. I had them a little bit below Cleveland because I think that they have a bit more of an issue of how to get all that stuff handled, but they're a team that I could see doing well.
Yeah, I had them at 12. I had one more team ahead of them that you did not, but I did have them in the top 12 still. I still think this is going to be a really good football team. They if they bring back Jonnu Smith, I think this offense can be just as good as it was last year, especially with a healthy offensive line with was it Jack Conklin? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jack Conklin coming back.
Wait,
So I
no.
think
Jack Conklin was the one who left for Cleveland.
yes, Lewan. Sorry, Taylor Lewan coming
Okay.
back. Yeah, so with the guys coming back healthy on the offensive line, with Jonnu Smith maybe coming back as a re-sign guy, I think this team can be still really good on the offensive side of the ball, which probably puts it in at least the top 15 because that offense was so dangerous. Now the question is, can they build this defense enough to be respectable? Because that's where we basically cast them aside in the playoffs because we're like, hey, this is a good team in one phase of the game. They have to get better in phases 2 or 3. Now, the thing is that one phase is so good that it put it in a really good position. But if they can improve those two sides of the ball, I think that they can be a really competitive team. But it's going to be interesting to see how they address those issues.
Yeah. All right. Number 13 now. Where are you going?
So this team has been kind of, torn apart this offseason. And I think a lot of people are still talking about where does this team go going forward. I'm still going to pick the New Orleans Saints here. I had them at number 11. Now, so this was the number 1 team in football by DVOA last year in the regular season. And if you looked at it, I think that we all kind of debated is top to bottom this the most talented roster in the NFL last year? And I think I think it was, honestly. I think it was the most talented roster from top to bottom, at least the starters, the most talented in the league. Now, some of the guys underperformed. They had a ton of injuries. They had some issues. But I think overall, this team's still going to be pretty good. They got a mess of a cap situation to figure out and a quarterback situation to figure out. But I still think even when they chop down some of this roster, it's still going to be a pretty good roster once it all comes out. I don't think it's going to be best team in the league, most talented roster in the league. But I still think it's going to be a pretty good football team going forward.
Yeah, so I'm much lower on the Saints than you are. And the thing about the Saints is I do agree that there is a ton of talent. And I was debating putting them higher even during this podcast. I had them at 19, so I have them a lot lower. And my concern is even if they get all the cap stuff figured out, which, eventually they'll have to, it's hard to imagine them finding enough cap to re-sign Trey Hendrickson and Marcus Williams. I think those two guys are gone. So that's at least what they have. They might have to get rid of some more. I still think Marshawn Lattimore could end up being a cap casualty. It's possible. They're in a bit of a bind there. On top of this, obviously, with Drew Brees probably going to retire, do you really trust a team with Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston with a now not as good defense and a team that also can't improve that much? They can't go out and sign anybody through free agency, so they can't really fix a lot of these issues that they might have. I think this could be a really it's going to be sort of like when we saw, when we saw the Patriots without Tom Brady and they lost a lot of other stuff. And it's like, okay, this is going to have to be a real test for Bill Belichick. This is going to be a real test for Sean Payton right here.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm in agreement with a lot of it. I think that they have some issues that are going to be kind of exposed this season. And I think the offseason is going to be tough for them. But I still think it's a team in a position that just because I think this roster going in was so talented, that I think they're still going to be competitive after all of this. I still think they're going to be in a position where as the chips fall, this team's still going to be in a pretty good position to, like I said, I think the days of the New Orleans Saints being Super Bowl contenders are over, but I don't think this team's going to fall from grace and fall to the bottom of the standings all of a sudden. I think it's still going to be a potential playoff team. I think it has talented players in Michael Thomas, Alvin Kamara, still really talented players on the defense, and Cameron Jordan and more, that I think that they're going to be just fine overall. They just, they're going to be worse than they are this past year, but I don't think they're going to be awful.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And I guess really the reason why I have them a lot lower is I just have a hard. So my tiers were the next tier I had that I'm picking all these teams on is that I can see it. So I can see a way that you go on to win a Super Bowl. I can see that path. And the tier below has work to do. And I think the Saints are clearly a has work to do team. I think that they're going to really have to find a way, maybe another great draft or something. I think they're just in a bind right here because of the cap. And And again, because of Drew Brees leaving. And I know, I think someone said earlier, the great Eli Mullen said, I trust Winston more than Brees. But while that might have been true in the divisional round, that wasn't true early on. Brees did do a lot of good earlier in the season. It wasn't until later that he kind of fell off. So I think that it's going to hurt. And I think that there's a lot of, this seems like a 7-9 team to me more than it seems like a 12-4 team.
That's fair. I mean, the way I was looking at this team is right now, the way I think this plays out is it's probably a 10-6, 9-7 team, which I think makes the playoffs. That's the only reason I had them here. I think they're in that position. Now, like I said, I don't see this team. I think the days of them winning a Super Bowl are over, but I think my Super Bowl contenders as of right now, I have a very defined list of my Super Bowl contenders, and it probably stops at Indianapolis here for me. And I don't really see New Orleans in that tier, but I don't see them as a bottom tier team for me.
Yeah, I don't see them as a bottom tier team either. I just think that they have work to do, and it's going to have to be a lot. And there's just teams I like better. So we'll use that as a segue to the number 14 on the board. This is my 13th ranked team. I'm going to Pittsburgh Steelers. And listen, the Steelers, yes, they have offensive line issues they have to work on. They have running back issues they have to work on, but they were just able to get a cap hit. They were able to get Ben to have take a pay cut to continue as the starter. I don't think Roethlisberger is awful. There's this idea that like Roethlisberger is this quarterback who all of a sudden can't play anymore. And I get it. He threw 4 picks in the playoff game. But if you watch it, a lot of these picks were batted balls. I actually talked on my Twitch stream. We went over it. And I think that Roethlisberger is better than people realize. At least he was last year. Again, older quarterback. Who knows? Could fall off. There's that possibility. But they still have a really good defense. And they still have a really a good receiving core. And I don't think losing Juju Smith-Schuster will hurt that. They just need a consistent running game. So to have one thing to have to work on, and if they work on that, I could see them really being a very good team.
Yeah, so I had Steelers 15th on my list. I still think it's going to be a pretty good team because, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't really see a scenario where the Pittsburgh Steelers and that organization's ever going to, accept a bad football team. I think they're going to be just fine. I'm with you that some of the Ben stuff's overblown. He can't throw the ball the whole time, though, anymore. That's what the thing is. I think they need to figure out a way to fix this running game. And I think it's more, the team I had above them at 14, we'll get to in a second, obviously. But I felt like their issues were more fixable than the Steelers' running game issues because I think it comes down to not only the offensive line, but the running backs also. I think they have to have a long look as is James Conner a guy that we can trust long-term for this team? And then they also have some issues with not just Juju Smith-Schuster and, from some reports that I've heard, guys are going to, the Giants might be looking at Alejandro Villanueva, which makes that offensive line stuff to rebuild even harder. That I think that this team, along with Bud Dupree, they got some issues they got to work out in how they're going to fill this roster and, improve this team. So I think I had them 15th overall. I think I have them 8th in the AFC right now. So they're kind of battling for that playoff spot for me. I just think that they have issues on this roster they need to address.
Yeah, well, I have good news for Steelers fans. Eli Mullen just said run game will be fixed. So there you go.
All right, never mind. We're good. Let's move into the top 10.
Yes, exactly. Okay, you teased it. Number 15 on the board, number 14 on your board. Who is it?
Arizona Cardinals. I think this team's an offensive line away from being a pretty good football team. They got to give some protection to Kyler Murray. This is a really talented team. They added, he's almost become underrated because he's not Defensive Player of the Year, J.J. Watt. He's very good, J.J. Watt, though. So getting him, pairing him with Chandler Jones, I think this is a really dangerous front four, which could mask some of the issues in the secondary, especially if they bring back Hassan Reddick as well. So I think this team can be really dangerous. They just got to improve a few things. And like I said, things like their offensive line, I think, are more fixable than the Steelers' running game.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm very interested to see what they do with, how they finagle the cap because they, I believe a lot of J.J. Watt's money is actually just for going to the next season, which helps them a lot and could help them re-sign a lot of their players. Because if they re-sign Reddick and they have Watt, Reddick, and Chandler Jones, and they're all healthy, that could be huge. JJ Watt's so interesting because you couldn't not hear about him for like by turning on any sports show at a certain point. And then all of a sudden he got hurt for back-to-back years. Everyone assumed he was washed. He came back, had 16 sacks, and like nobody even cared. I don't know why. Somehow in that injury period, people said, we don't care about you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is honestly just health. He had some issues with health, and he struggled to stay healthy at points in his career. But, I mean, nobody was going to look awesome in that defense last year. He was playing with Ross Blacklock and, guys you probably couldn't even name on the Texans defensive line. There's just no way he was going to be overly successful with that group. I thought he had, if you looked at some of the advanced numbers in his pass rush win rate, stuff like that, he actually had a pretty good year despite playing with that team. I think he's going to be really good on this group. And, this was a team that, I think still has some issues that they're going to have to work out. It was 10th in DVOA in defense. So this is still a pretty good defense that added JJ Watt. If they can bring some of these guys back, I really believe in this team being really good going forward, especially if they can help protect Kyler Murray.
Here's the issue with Arizona, and it's something that we talked about last year, is they really rely on high-end talent, where it's DeAndre Hopkins, and then, we all love Larry Fitzgerald, but he's not what he once, he wasn't what he once was last year. And on defense, it felt like their secondary was like Budda Baker doing 90% of the work, and it worked out okay, but they're one injury away from disaster. And so I think that's a real concern.
Yeah, I think that there are some issues with the defense. I think Patrick Peterson, is a free agent, isn't he? So, I mean, not that, I don't think he was honestly very great for them last year, but, I think that you're going to see some improvement out of Isaiah Simmons. I think this team could be pretty good next year in the secondary if he develops and gets even better. But yeah, I mean, I do think along with offensive line, they probably could add a receiver to really help this group, reach its potential. I just believe in this team, and I believe in the direction they're going in. I don't know if I love Cliff Kingsbury, but I think he has a good group around him, and he has a lot of talent around him to work with.
Yeah, I think they're fine. They could be a lot. They're kind of a boomer bust type team. I think number 16 is another one of those teams. How about the Chargers? Speaking of teams that could be an offensive line away, if hypothetical situation, if the Chargers had like a top 5 offensive line next year, this feels like a team that could be a championship contender. I think that the Brandon Staley, their new defensive, he's their head coach, could be a really good defensive guy. Herbert with a lot of weapons. I think that this is a team that we could see a big jump right here. And again, they're kind of a boom or bust because if they can't fix the offensive line, that could be an issue. But I feel like there's a lot of hope here for the Chargers.
Yeah, I mean, this was a team. I felt like it was kind of a low-key 7-9 for as much as people love Justin Herbert. I don't think a lot of people were paying attention to how close this team was to actually having a winning record. I mean, I believe in Herbert. Whatever thing, I'm going to find something that I'm willing to sacrifice to make sure that Derwin James stays healthy because he's so fun to watch when he is healthy. So whatever we can to sacrifice to make sure he's on the field, I'm going to do it because I want to see him back on the field. I think, like you said, with Staley and the amount of talent in this defense, especially top-end talent, this defense could be really good next year. I would think I was high on this defense a year too early because I said it could be really good last year. Mm-hmm. And they still have really good players on the offensive side of the ball. They still have, like you said, Herbert. They have Keenan Allen. They have Mike Williams. I think this is a team that's going to be really good next season. I had them at 16, and I think they're going to be competing for a playoff spot.
Yeah, I think there's plenty to like about this Chargers team. I don't have too much else to add. You want to move on to number 17?
Yeah, and actually, I need to correct myself. I had one team ahead of them that was not picked yet. I had them at 17. At 17 here, the team I had at number 16, they got some cap issues to work out, but I still believe with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, Dalvin Cook. I still believe in the Minnesota Vikings can be a competitive football team. Now, the secondary was completely atrocious last year, and they might lose Anthony Harris out of it, but I still think if they're able to get some at least replacement level cornerbacks. They don't need superstar corners. They need replacement level cornerbacks that aren't going to get killed on every play. I still think the Vikings can bounce back and be a pretty good football team. So I'm going to go with the Vikings here at number 17.
Yeah, no, I don't think that I think this is the fine pick. I think that I had him a lower. I had him at 21. They're in a has work to do tier for me still because I feel like they have a lot of issues on defense they have to work out. And on top of this, I just don't love how this offense is built. You have all these talent with Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook, but I just don't love the offense of we're going to run the ball 30 times a game. I think that's kind of a very ancient offense, and you need to get more explosives than they're getting. I feel like this is a team that they're an offensive built team, and I still have them somewhat near the top, just because, or near the top 20, because I feel like there is that hope with the offense. But I just feel like there's other offensive built teams that do a better job than I think Minnesota does at maximizing their talent.
That's fair. And you know what? I probably don't view this team as a playoff team, but I think that they can be in a position to, they still, after all that, finished 7-9 last year. And I think a lot of people thought this team went 4-12 last year, honestly. And it was, definitely a downgrade from where they were before, but it's still, I think, a competitive football team. And I think they have enough pieces on offense that at least that side of the ball is going to be pretty good, even if they lose Kyle Rudolph. Because of those two receivers and Cook, no one's going to love Kirk Cousins, but I think I trust him enough to at least keep this offense rolling. I just think it's the defensive side of the ball for me that has questions.
Yeah, some people probably love Kirk Cousins, like his family, I would bet.
It's debatable.
Okay, all right. Number 18, I'm going with the Balls here. I had them 16 on my list. The quarterback position is a bit of an issue, but I thought their offensive line was pretty good and had some really good games, especially with Heineke there. And I almost wonder how much Haskins maybe made them look worse. They had a quarterback carousel. They're still trying to figure that position out, but they have Terry McLaurin. They have a really good defense. Ron Rivera has done a great job with them, and they play in a weak division. So they have a really good shot at winning the division and getting a home playoff game and just building some wins that way. So I think that the Balls here at 18, I think this is a bit of a steal here.
Yeah, I had them actually at 20. Just, if we're ranking the top 32 teams, I had them at 20. That's the only reason. I have them as my number one NFC East team. I still don't think this division gets good enough to, do anything serious. I'm interested in, I don't believe this team's actually going to roll with Taylor Heineke and just be like, okay, this is our guy this year. I think somebody else gets brought in. I don't know who that's going to be, but I think somebody else has to come in because I can't just think that they saw a game and they saw Taylor Heineke play and still brought back Alex Smith over him. And then Alex Smith got hurt again. And they put Heineke, they basically had to play Heineke again at that point, if I remember correctly. So I just imagine that they're going to bring somebody else in to compete with him, and I don't know who it's going to be. So I have questions on if it's going to be Heineke or a rookie. I have concerns then. I have concerns at that point, especially if they're picking a rookie at pick 20.
Yeah, it's a huge concern. I think it's fair to have them a little bit lower because of that. It's the most important position. But if they can figure that out, and again, it seems like there's 20 teams every year that are a quarterback away, but they are a true quarterback away team. So that's why. So they're an interesting team, but they got to figure that position out. And maybe, listen, there's a lot of good quarterbacks. Maybe they can trade up and get someone there. So there's things they can do.
Yeah, a ton of cap space. They got to bring back Braden Scherf, but they have a ton of cap space. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, I think that they could be a good team. But I still think it's kind of an incomplete product right now. And I think the issue is like it's hard to project what this team could be because I still think there's a lot of pieces to add. And I think they could add a lot of pieces, but I just don't know what it will be yet. So that's why I had them at 20, but I understand the pick at 18.
Yeah. Okay, I agree. Okay, so we'll move on to number 19. I'm going to go to the bathroom, but I can hear you. So you go ahead with your 19th pick.
Okay. I'll try and talk as long-winded as possible, which works out because I'm going to take my team here at number 19. I had them at 18. I'm going to pick the New England Patriots here. In Bill Belichick, I trust pretty much is the reasoning behind this. I still think he's, the best coach in football. Maybe not the best drafter wide receivers in football, but he's the best head coach in football, which I think is a big thing. So I'm going to go with the Patriots and Bill Belichick here because, listen, this is a clean slate for them. They have a ton of cap space. They have the third most in the league right now at $66 million. They're going to figure out the quarterback situation. They're going to have to pick somebody there. I think that they're going to get a receiver that's going to help this team too, so they have some skill position talent. And for all the talk about this defense and how bad it was last season and, because of how good they were the year before, this wasn't necessarily a bad defense last year. Now, it was an incomplete defense, but I still think it was a pretty good defense overall. And I still think it can be a pretty good defense going forward because they got a couple young guys on their team that I think get better, like Kyle Duggar. They get some guys back from opt-outs. So I think the Patriots are going to be a decent team. Now, does that decent mean that they're 7-9, 8-8 again? That's possible. But I don't know if this is going to be a bad team is my thing.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think you had to justify it as much as you did either. I mean, I had them at number 17. They go at 19, but we both had other teams kind of earlier. I do think that this is the team that, again, it's Bill Belichick. You can't count Bill Belichick out. How many times have we said you can't count him out? But there are real concerns. I mean, they need to help the receiving core. They need a quarterback, which again, it's kind of like Washington, but they have even more needs because I don't know if their defense is as good as Washington's. I don't know if their offensive line's better, but their receiving core certainly isn't, and they also need a quarterback. So it's interesting to see exactly how they're going to go here. But yeah, they're absolutely a team. They're the last team that was in the tier of I could see it. Like it wouldn't be crazy to me if this Patriots team has a great 2021 season.
Yeah, so I think they're going to be in a position, and they might have even open up even more cap space if they find a way to trade a Stephon Gilmore, or do they package then a J.C. Jackson for a big time quarterback, Deshaun Watson. So we'll see. I mean, I think this is going to be a competitive team. I don't know if it's going to be a playoff team. If you looked at our power rankings and count them up, I have them as our 10th AFC team, just behind the Chargers. So I have them just outside the playoffs, but I have them in the conversation staying competitive.
Yeah, I could absolutely see that. And it'll be interesting to see how many third round tight ends they get this year.
Yeah. All tight end draft.
Yes, exactly.
We are solving this positional issue.
After trading backs that have all 32 picks in the 7th round.
Oh gosh.
All right. Okay, number 20, I'm going with the Raiders. This again, I had them at 18. They were kind of a team where it feels like there's a lot of teams that I feel pretty confident that could do well. The issue with the Raiders, I do feel like it's been a lot of coaching with their defense. I think that their defense could be better. They need to fix that. But again, they're a team where their offense is good enough that they can win enough games. This was a team that was a fringe playoff team up until the last few weeks of the season when the wheels fell off. I think that this is a team that could be really good. They're in my has work to do tier. I think that they have some work they need to do. It's really with the defense and how are they going to fix that. And this team hasn't shown me that they can fix that just yet. But if they can fix it, they'll be in a really good position.
Yeah, so I had this team at 19. And so we're kind of had all these teams in the same tier, just a few realigned. Like I had Minnesota higher, you had Washington higher. So that's kind of how this worked out. I had them at 19. And I'm kind of with you on this. I think that the offense can be really good again next year. I think the two spots we're in with the Raiders, the two different spots we're in between me and you is I think you believe a lot of these young players on their defense had the potential to be really good. And I have questions about how the potential of a lot of these young players on their team. Now, I think a lot of these guys, I haven't been impressed with guys like, what's the safety's name? Jonathan
Abram?
Jonathan Abrams. I haven't been overly impressed with a lot of his game. I haven't been overly impressed with some of these guys in the secondary. They draft a lot of cornerbacks that I think I need to see a little more progression out of. Now, is this because of Paul Guenther's defense, or is Paul Guenther's defense bad and these players also not very good? Now, I think that's the question that we're going to see this year. I think that they could add a few players this year to really help the team on that defensive side of the ball. But I still have questions about a lot of these guys.
It's fair to have the questions. And again, it's hard to imagine the defense getting too much worse than it was at certain points last year. Again, like that cover 2 in Miami one day, Miami got decapitated while throwing the bomb to get in field goal range. There was no one around. It's like, hey, try to cover some receivers. Maybe that would be a good idea. So I think that there's certainly concerns there. But again, the flip side is that their offense was awesome last year. And Derek Carr had a really good season. They have an offensive line that was banged up for a good point of last season, and they still were able to have so much success. So it could actually get much better, I think. So I think that, again, improve the defense. This could easily become a top 10 team, but that's a big issue, which is why they're currently here, 20th overall and 18 on my board.
How good does Derek Carr have to be to like not be in trade rumors? Like, does he have to throw for like 5,000 yards for people to stop putting him in trade rumors?
He has to win a Super Bowl or at least win playoff games. Like that's literally what he has to. Like, it has nothing to do with his performance. It has to do with team performance.
Yeah, and I just think that there's kind of like this judgment of him already. That's basically it too. So, it's interesting. I thought he was really good last year. I thought that, like you said, that offense was good. And that was basically with getting his ear outside of the Jets play that was the end of Greg Williams in the NFL. They basically got a zero out of Henry Ruggs. So, with him getting healthy and getting an offseason of work, maybe that fixes some things for them too. That offense could be even better with that deep threat. Yeah,
absolutely. You're 100% right about that. And Cleveland Furl looked a little bit better. Still has work to do, but they're an interesting team. Raiders always interesting. Number 21. Who do you got?
All right. My next team on this list is, I had these two teams back to back. My number 2 team in the NFC East, the New York Giants. I still kind of view them in Washington as somewhat similar. They have some free agents on that defense that was very good last year that they have to address. Leonard Williams, I think, is due for a big payday. But, I mean, I still think, Darius Slayton, Saquon Barkley healthy, we've been on 5 years of the Giants need to fix their offensive line. Mm-hmm. But if they manage to fix this offensive line, I think that there's a competitive offense around here. I think it's kind of the same thing, though, is do you trust Daniel Jones? I certainly don't, because, he puts the ball on the ground more than any other quarterback I've ever seen, besides Taysom Hill. So if your number one skill is the ability to fumble the football, I have questions, but I still think there's a really good team around him.
Yeah, I don't know how good of a team. So I have him lower. I have him at 25, which I know people are going to say is too low for the Giants. But I think my concerns is, like you said, they do have some guys, Leonard Williams, that could hurt. I think that basically, if you compare them to Washington, I don't think their defense is as good as Washington. Their offensive line isn't as good as Washington. Their receiving core isn't as good as Washington. And they both need quarterbacks. So that's kind of the one constant. Saquon Barkley, again, he's another one of those guys. Like, we can talk about how great he is if we want, but he never stays healthy. So he's great highlight reel level guy. And again, after a few big injuries to a running back, who knows what's going to happen? We hope that he's going to be great because he's so electric to watch, and we all thought he was future Hall of Famer after his rookie season, but he hasn't been on the field. And again, Daniel Jones, he's not awful, but again, he's in that weird territory of like, he hasn't been good enough to justify not trying to find a better replacement, and they're trying to be successful. The biggest thing going for the Giants, I think, is that they play in the NFC East.
That's probably true, and that's probably why they're in this position. But, this is a team where they went out and beat Seattle, and they beat a couple other teams. And, they actually looked like a pretty good football team and competitive. And I thought Joe Judge did I don't want to say really good. I thought he did a pretty good job as a first-year head coach in that situation. So I give Joe Judge a lot of credit, and I'm willing to see what happens in year 2. This is a team that, they basically won 4 in a row and then lost a bunch of games. So it was a weird season for them, but I still think they're in a position where they can stay competitive. And like you said, in the NFC East, you can throw a dart and pick the team who's going to win it. I still think, even when we pick Washington as the best team, and I do feel like they're the best team in this group, I still feel like it's sort of a crapshoot between these 4 teams.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Let's move on to 22 here. I have my favorite team that I always get too hyped on, the Denver Broncos here, 22. Again, I'm going to, for whatever reason, every year I'm convinced the Broncos are ready to take that next step. There's a lot of issues here. Again, I'm not sure how confident I feel in the quarterback position. I think they need to move on from Locke personally. But, man, their offensive line has issues. But even with all of the injuries, they have a good receiving core and they have a good defense. So, again, there is a pathway here, and maybe you could see if they can get the quarterback position and get some of these offensive line things. This is a team I could see taking the next leap. But, again, I feel like I say that every year about Denver.
Yeah, I mean, we continue to say this. Has really talented players. Can they bring back Justin Simmons? I think it can be a good team, but even with this team having some cap space to work with too, I had them at 25 just because I still feel like I have more questions than answers. I still feel like this team is a team that can flip it around really quickly because of the cap space they have and, the talented players they have. I really like this receiving core, and I think Judy gets better. But I just feel like right now there's way more questions about Denver than answers about Denver. So I had them a little lower because of that, but I understand the entire thought process of liking the Broncos.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Also, they did franchise tag Justin Simmons, so they got
Okay.
that.
Sweet.
Yeah. Also, I reported incorrectly. Oh, and here there's even a comment. Frank the Tank, good work there. And I reported incorrectly that Marcus May got franchised. It was reported that way. I trusted the source. I trusted the guy who reported it, but turns out that's not exactly the case just yet. So, if you're confused, not there. But yeah. Okay. So let's move on to 23. Who do you got?
We're kind of hitting the bottom tier here. I had two teams that I kept going back and forth on. I ended up just picking the Dallas Cowboys just because they still need to re-sign Dak, and I don't know what's the process going on with here. But this is still a team who, at the very least, those first few weeks of the season, we thought this offense was going to be good enough to win them the division. Now, they dealt with a ton of injuries that derailed the entire season. But if you're just picking teams to rank right now, if this offense is healthy, I still think it's going to be pretty good. They're in a position to win just about every game to start the season. Now, they also have to blame for losing all of those games too. But, they're in a position to win all four of those games. They went 1-3 to start. And I think this offense is at least going to be good enough to put them in a position with this division to stay somewhat competitive. So we'll see.
So, we could talk about the beginning of that season, but let's remember that there was this crazy onside kick where the Falcons decided they didn't like touching footballs and decided to not jump on the onside kick. Without that, they're 0-4. And then they were losing in week 5 when Dak got hurt. They came back and beat the Giants in that game. So, yes, Dak is great. Dak did a lot of really good stuff with that offense. They still weren't winning football games against even bad teams, and they were barely winning the games that they were, only because the Falcons know nothing better than to how to blow leads. I think that they're in my bottom tier, which is the I don't see it tier. I just have a hard time seeing this because we don't know if Dak is back. Their defense was horrible last year. On top of this, they have Mike McCarthy. And again, I still don't know why anyone would have faith in Mike McCarthy. I think that this is the team that that some pundits are going to somehow predict the Cowboys to win the Super Bowl because every year they do for some reason. I think that this is a team they're just not that good. It's hard to see them getting better, and it's pretty easy to see them getting worse. If they lose Dak, I mean, this team could be a first overall pick contender.
Yeah, I mean, if they better find a way to re-sign him, honestly, or else they might as well just move on now. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens here, but yeah, I mean. This was pick 23, so we're kind of in the bottom tier teams anyways. I just had them here because I have a lot less trust in the other teams, and I have a lot of questions about the teams below them. That's why.
Yeah, so I still have 3 teams in the have work to do tier. So here at 24, I'm going Chicago. I'm going to Chicago Bears. Listen, they need to figure out the quarterback position. Maybe if they get Russell Wilson, that would instantly put them a lot higher. But again, their offensive line is another big issue. They're losing receiving core. So basically offense as a whole, but they have a really good defense. And at this point, they're one of the teams that I feel like at least is like, okay, they have one thing that's good. So that puts them ahead of the rest of the field here at this point.
Yeah. I mean, they have some cap issues. It's not much. I think they get out of it pretty easily, honestly. I think my one question with Chicago is, I talked about this a little bit at the beginning of last season. You don't see teams typically have continued runs of success as top 5 defenses. Eventually, there is a drop-off. We saw it with a few teams. Now, Jacksonville is because, the entire locker room imploded, basically. But you do see these teams eventually the defenses start to get figured out a little bit. Now, is the clock ticking on Chicago's defense from being an elite defense to just a very good defense? And at this point, if it's just a very good defense and not an elite defense, where is this team at going forward? That's my biggest question with Chicago. They were the team I was going back and forth with Dallas, and eventually I put them just below because of that question. Because if this defense isn't elite, how good can this team actually be?
Yeah, I agree. Really, what they need is they just need to find a way to, trade the farm and get Russell Wilson. That's what they need.
Yeah. I mean, they've been rumored to be with every quarterback, so naturally they're going to end up with like Gardner Minshew next year. So
yeah, exactly. And they'll still, hey, Gardner, he'll have like one good game. Is Gardner Minshew good? And then no. All right, number 25. Who do you got?
All right, this is a young team. I think they're interesting. I still feel like this is a team that I still feel like is 2 or 3 years away from me taking seriously as like a playoff team, but I think they're interesting. I'm going to watch them next year and be interested in seeing them. That's the Carolina Panthers for me. Drafted all defense last year. The defense ended up, having some moments that looked really good. And, I guess they're moving on from Teddy Bridgewater, so it's going to be interesting to see who they bring in at quarterback, whether it's through the draft or whether it's through a trade or free agency. They have some different avenues to explore. I just think, like I said, I think it's a few years away from being a pretty good team. I just think that they're an interesting team going forward because they have young talent across the roster.
Yeah, I mean, here's something that maybe you won't love because I know you're a big Mac Jones fan. I watched his tape and I was sort of blown away by. At first I was like, "Oh, his pocket presence isn't great," and then I started watching more, and he completely fixed that. He did a lot really well. To me, this feels like a great fit. Getting him, I believe they picked 8th overall. Like this seems like a get Mac Jones at number 8. This could really be a perfect fit for this offense. And again, like you said, they drafted all defense last year. They still got a lot of young guys. They have, although I do like how their defense, again, very creative defense. It's always fun when we see something unique. It would be tough to see them make a complete jump from where they were last year. Like I agree with you. I think they're a year away, but they're a team I also have right here, and they're one of the teams that I do find interesting. And I can, again, they're in the have work to do tier because I can see it here.
Yeah. Like I said, I think that they have young pieces that they're going to build around. It's just, these things take time. You don't become a good football team in a day unless you're Tampa Bay Buccaneers signing Tom Brady, So I think that they're in a position that they're going to build. It's just going to take a little bit of time for them. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward. But I like a lot of these pieces. And hey, Mac Jones, I think makes a lot of sense. I've been high on Mac Jones since last July. I think that he's a super talented quarterback. I think the thing going against Mac Jones is he's almost too boring and like a safe pick right now is the problem. Like, I think people look at like, oh, well, Trey Lance can do this, this, and this. Oh, well, Justin Fields can do this, this, and this. Oh, look at Zach Wilson's arm. Mac Jones is just steady. Mac Jones is just going to do what he does. Now, he's really good at a lot of the things he does. So I think he's going to be a good quarterback. He just feels like the safe pick. So I wouldn't blame the Carolina Panthers for taking him there, but it's going to be hard to say no to like the talent potential of a Fields or Trey Lance at 8 over a guy like Mac Jones.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't have to spend too much on it. I love how, again, Mac Jones, it seems like just every throw, it's just right on the money. Just, it's so consistent. So, but yeah. Anyways, I'll move on to number 26 now. I'm going to go another team. I feel like this is my last team to have work to do tier. Kind of in a similar spot of the Carolina Panthers, the Cincinnati Bengals here. I think that, again, their defense is nowhere near what I think Carolina's defense is, and it's not like Carolina's defense is setting the world on fire, but I do think that there's moves that can be made, and I especially just like how this offense can operate. They have a talented offense. They need to fix the offensive line, obviously, but again, Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, they have good receiving talent. They're a team that I can see maybe winning some shootouts. It's really just I like Joe Burrow a lot, and I think that they have sort of it's almost like a bowl is most useful when it's empty kind of thing. They have resources they can use to help themselves out.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is that between them and like the Jets and a lot of these other teams with cap space is we already have seen that Joe Burrow is a pretty good quarterback. Now, you can say that Trevor Lawrence feels like a sure thing, but at the end of the day, until we actually see him on a field, we're never entirely sure. So we know that Joe Burrow is going to be pretty good next year as long as he's healthy. So if they can add to this offensive line, and like you said, they have a lot of pieces they need to add, I think this is going to at least be a frisky team. Now, does frisky mean that they win 5 games? Probably. but I think it's going to be an interesting team to see going forward. So I think that they have some pieces to build around, but I think Carolina is a little closer to being a really competitive team, but similar situation that, they have pieces going forward that they can look forward to. It's just going to take some time to be good.
Yeah. All right. Number 27 now. And these are all my teams that I say I don't see it. I have a hard time predicting these teams, winning a championship. I don't see it. Number 27, where are you going?
I actually, I don't see it for this team, but I had them at 25 just because, they got some cap issues to figure out, but I could see the Atlanta Falcons being competitive just because, listen, like I said, they have cap issues, but with Arthur Smith and Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, if they can figure out those cap issues without giving up any of those guys, I want to see it. I want to see those guys on a field looking good together because I think they're all super talented players. So I just want to see those, Smith as the head coach and running an offense with Jones and Ryan. I just want to see that, and I'll see how this team does.
Yeah, and Calvin Ridley. I mean, he's a true number one receiver. Like, he was great last year. So even without Julio Jones, he's a number. They have two number one receivers, and one of them is maybe number one in the league, period, with Julio. And their defense definitely got a lot better once they got rid of Dan Quinn. So they're right here at number 27, too. And honestly, maybe this could end up being the steal of the draft, now that I think about it, because I do feel like there is a chance they can just completely fix everything. They need to fix the running game, but I think that there's some hope here.
Yeah. I mean, Todd Gurley proved to be basically what Todd Gurley is. So, I mean, he's not the same anymore. He was a touchdown guy. That was basically it. Like I said, I think this team, they got to figure something out to maybe where they try and cut a few guys, restructure some contracts to get this back down to a good number. But I just, at the very least, I think they have some issues on the offensive line, but overall, I trust Smith because I've seen it multiple years at Tennessee, and I trust everyone else on this team that I think they're at least going to be competitive. I don't know if it's going to lead to a lot of wins, but I think they can be competitive if they keep those guys.
Yeah, I agree. Number 28 here, I'm going the New York Jets. All right, so they are here in the bottom five. Again, not exactly a lot of great deep, but first, second overall pick, I think they'll get Zach Wilson, who should be great. So I think that could help them out a ton. Again, I think that they can maybe make some moves to improve their offense. Their defense has some pieces as well. So I think that and then the cap space thing. So they're a team that they have stuff that it's not because of what they have in terms of talent. It's because of what they have in terms of resources. And Robert Saleh is someone who I'm very interested in seeing how he can run a team. He seems like someone who has a great resume heading into this. So they're here at 28. Yeah.
I mean, I had them at 29. I had one team above them that's in a similar situation.
The Jaguars?
Basically. So two teams that are basically the exact same right now in situation. I mean, the Jets, we saw it at the end of the year that they actually looked, kind of competitive at the end of the season. They won a couple games at the very end of the year that got them out of the number one pick. And, we've seen this Zach Wilson thing and how they developed. And, everyone's really high on him right now. So it's going to be interesting to see going forward, if he's the guy they take at 2 and how that works out. I think the issue is the only question is going to be, is they're going to ask him to do a lot right away. And are they going to be able to put a decent roster around him to protect him and kind of ease him into the league? Because I think it's a huge talent discrepancy from who was playing BYU last year and going to the NFL this year.
But the bright side is there's not a huge talent disparity in who was his teammates at BYU compared to his teammates with the Jets. So he's got that as a pretty good thing going for him.
The thing is that the problem is BYU was just more talented than a lot of the teams they played last year, was my thing too. Outside of Coastal Carolina, the game they lost, BYU still had a couple of NFL guys. They were playing virtually no NFL talent around them. But
I mean, I still say, again, we'll get into this debate maybe later. But I mean, if you go back and watch the games, like compared to all these other, really, I think compared to all the other top 5, top 6 quarterbacks, he had, I would say, the most difficult situation.
That's probably fair. But, I mean, it'll be interesting to see. It's going to be interesting to see.
Also, I was just making a joke about the Jets. That was all that was.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Okay.
I mean, I think they're going to be fine. I think that they'll figure out a way to be a more competitive team, but I don't know how much more competitive they get, you know.
Yeah. Number 29 now. You have the Jaguars. How come?
Well, I like Trevor Lawrence more than Zach Wilson. So, I mean, as much as Zach Wilson's, stock has skyrocketed, I still believe in Lawrence as the real deal. I think he's going to be a good pro. Now, I said that I've seen Joe Burrow on an NFL field look really good, so I believe in that a little more. But I still think he's in a position where he's going to be really good. And I like a lot of this offense on this team. Like, they have cap space, which obviously, cap space looks nice until you actually sign the players. So they're going to have to do that. But the players on this roster, I think, can be a pretty good offense with Lawrence if he pans out, with James Robinson, with the halfway decent offensive line, with DJ Chark, with Laviska Shenault. I think this is a competitive offense that needs a lot of help on defense, but I think that they're going to have a lot of help on defense. So I'm going to go with Jacksonville in that situation.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, I still haven't watched all of Lawrence's tape from last year, so the Wilson or Lawrence, I still haven't given a opinion on. But with I do think that the Jaguars just have better offensive talent around them. My concern is, my concern is with the Jaguars. I just think that their defense it's not good. It's just not a good
Wreck.
defense.
Yeah.
It's and their first round pick, Caleb Chason, he made our most disappointing rookies list from last year. Or at least he was either that or an honorable mention. I think that the defense needs to, at least the Jets have like defensive players and they can have more things to work around. So that's kind of why I have Jacksonville here at 29.
That's fair. I mean, like I said, we don't see it with either of these teams. I don't think these teams are going to be a good playoff position. I think the thing is with the Jets, like, while the defense is more competitive, I don't see the defense being good. I think the way I look at it is if I look at the four phases of the ball between the Jaguars offense and defense and the Jets offense and defense, I could see the Jaguars offense being the best of that group. And that's the reason why I had them ahead.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I also think that the Jaguars defense is the worst of the group, though. So that's why I have them below. So kind of interesting. And offense does win more football games. So maybe there's some truth to what you're saying. Number 30, I'm going to Philadelphia Eagles here. So the three teams left were the Eagles, the Texans, and the Lions. I'm going to Eagles just because I think Jalen Hurts is pretty solid. He's showed decent stuff. And I think that he can find a way to sort of find, he's shown he can will you to a win or two, I think, even if he also might lose you a game or two. They have a real bad issue with the cap. There's a lot of issues, quite frankly, but they're also Eagles defense sort of sneakily a lot better than people realize. So they have that going for them at least. They're losing players, issue with the cap. Don't know if their quarterback is any good, but they have no receiving. There's a lot of issues. They're a bottom three team, but I still think there's two teams that I have less confidence in.
Yeah, I mean, if it wasn't for the Saints, we'd be talking about this situation a whole lot right now, especially, they got rid of their quarterback. I don't trust a lot of this team at all. So I don't think there's going to be a good football team next year. I've mentioned this a bunch of times. I think that they got a long way to go to make this team competitive. So it'll be interesting. I don't think it's going to be a good football team at all. And I'm already ready to gouge my eyes out when they have Cowboys Eagles week 3 Sunday night. I'll be honest. I cannot wait to not watch that game.
Yeah, week 3, it'll be like week 15.
They're going to have it on twice, Sunday Night Football. Collinsworth. Now, here's a guy who's not very good at football or something like that. So, I can't wait to not watch these Eagles games. This team is not going to be fun to watch next year, in my opinion. I'm interested in Hurts, and that's probably the only reason I'm going to tune in. But I don't see anything else about this team being very good.
Yeah. Again, I don't disagree. Number 31, your last pick. Do you have the Lions or Texans? Where are you going?
I have the Lions. Just because the Texans situation is just a whole nother level of bad. And I still don't see a situation where where Deshaun Watson's playing for that team. I just don't. I mean, honestly, they can say all they want that they're not trading him. But until he's on the field week 1, I'm just not believing it right now. I think it's a lot worse than the Russell Wilson situation. So the Lions basically are 31 because they're not the Houston Texans. This isn't the worst defense in football that belongs to Houston, which just has a complete train wreck of a secondary and lost their best player because they cut him and he went to the Cardinals for free. And so they lost their best defensive player from a really bad defense. The Lions are going to have issues because they don't have Stafford now. They don't have Kenny Golladay. They don't have Marvin Jones unless they manage to bring one of those guys back. I don't really know why they want to come back, but they have a lot of pieces to replace. But I still think they're not the Texans, so that's the thing that they have going for them. I think with the Lions, you just have to hope some of these guys look better. There is a situation where hopefully Okuda figures some things out in year 2. Cornerbacks typically take a lot longer to figure some things out, so hopefully those guys get better. Hopefully, DeAndre Swift becomes a little more consistent in year 2, that this team isn't like awful, but I don't think it's going to be good by any means.
Yeah, and I think Lions fans might be a bit annoyed that we have them this low. But listen, I actually think this is just a rebuilding year, and I think that could there be some talk about, hey, if you're the Lions, could you consider tanking here? Trade Jared Goff and just try to be bad and get the first overall pick, because the last 2 years, 2 teams deliberately tanked. The Jaguars with not starting Minshew and the Bengals with not starting Andy Dalton and instead starting, I believe it was Ryan Finley. I don't know what the quarterback situation is next year. I haven't looked into it, but but could there be some thought to that? Try to get a good quarterback and build there.
Well, here's the question: Do they need to trade Jared Goff to be bad at football?
Well, no, but that would make them a lot worse at football.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. I don't know what the trade situation is going to be for Goff, but I do think this is a rebuilding year. I don't think this is a team that's going to be competitive. And, even as bad as that division is, I feel like they're clearly 4th in that group overall. So I don't believe in anything about this team. So I think that they are going to rebuild. I think that they're going to have a high draft pick. Now, is it going to be a deliberate rebuild, or is it just going to be this is a bad football team missing a bunch of pieces? I'm leaning towards it's going to be the latter.
Right. And part of it is, Patricia just completely screwed up his team, where he got guys to fit a system that doesn't work in the NFL, and now you're stuck with a bunch of guys that fit like one system that you don't want to run. So they're just in a weird spot. Number 32, the Houston Texans. This is the clear-cut number 32. I guess the one way that they could end up being better is if somehow Watson says, okay, screw it, I'll play. I don't see how that happens, though. And so I think that this is a team that without Watson, hopefully they get good draft capital. This just seems like let's go 0-16 and get the number 1 overall pick, get some draft capital for Watson, and try to rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, if Watson decides to stay, what's the ceiling of this team? Isn't it 4-12, kind of like what we saw last year?
It might not even be that. It might not. I mean, in fairness, they had the 2 Colts games that both came down to a fumble at the goal. I think they maybe were a little bit better than their record showed, but around 4-12. Ceiling's probably 6-10, 7-9 at absolute best.
Yeah. I mean, they have a little bit of cap space to work with, but not a whole lot. They don't have draft picks to really build on this defense and get it better. And, they're likely going to lose Will Fuller unless they convince him to stay. So I just don't really see it kind of happening. I think 4-12 might be the ceiling with Watson. And at that point, is it really even worth keeping him? Is it even worth, they're trying to work hard at doing it. And I understand it because he's probably the second best quarterback in football right now, or third, probably third behind Rodgers and Mahomes, obviously. But, he's probably the third best quarterback in football. So I get wanting to keep him. But what's the point of having a guy like that if you have nobody around him to help him out? What's the point of, you can get a ton of capital to help your team in the long term because it's not going to be good with him in the short term anyway. So what's the point?
I would say he's probably the second most valuable quarterback in terms of if you take age and everything, but it might be a hot take saying he's better than Russell Wilson.
You think so?
I mean, I don't think it's a wrong take necessarily. I just think that's definitely going against public perception.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to look at it a lot more, but his season last year,
he had a better year last year.
Yeah, this team was 4-12 and he was awesome. So it tells you how bad the team was around him, So I think this is a fantastic player. I just think it's a tough situation where you're asking him to stick around and you have really no ways of improving. Why is a free agent going to want to sign for them next year?
Yeah, I totally agree. So, hey, that's our show. All 32
Yeah.
power rankings. It was a longer show than I think we anticipated, but a fun one. Again, if you missed it at the beginning, make sure you go to the link is in the description, the JKS Clips channel, so you can get the clips of all this stuff. We'll clip it up, so that'll make things easier, more fun. I also have my Twitch streams on there, so check that out. Subscribe; it's a great way to help us out. And Kyle, let them know where they can find you before we head out.
Yeah, follow us on Twitter. That's at Jackson Kruger. Follow me at by Kyle Grondin, GRONDIN, at by Kyle Grondin on Twitter. And then finally follow the account page at On the Sideline JK. I forgot to put show updates on there today, but show updates for our weekly show Sunday night, 9 o'clock Eastern. You can see it on there, plus any other comments about football coming up. Make sure to follow us there and check out our content.
Yes, and a week from today, the legal tampering begins. Exciting stuff. We will finally have actual football to talk about.
Yeah, can't wait. We're almost slowly grinding through this offseason, but I'm ready to go.
Yes, yeah, exactly. All right. So again, thanks everyone for watching. We appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.